This is a short module to bring everybody up to speed into what Oracle Database is, a brief history of Oracle databases, and its architecture. The relational model was created by Edgar Cott in 1970. In it, Cott described how the data should be structured, stored, and managed. The concepts of tuples and relations were introduced to the world. This model contrasted to the hierarchical model and network model, in which data is stored in tables in the forms of rows and columns. And these tables are related to other tables. Thus, the concept of relational came into play. The language that is used to access and manipulate the data in a relational database is called SQL or SQL, and it became an ANSI standard in 1986. Oracle version 2 was the first commercial relational database. This was back in 1979. Oracle has made vast improvements since, from adding basic concurrency control, where multiple sessions can read only committed data, row-level locking, to being able to create programs and store them inside the database in the form of store procedures. Oracle has added other useful features throughout the years, such as an interface to understand what the programs are doing inside the database, this for better troubleshooting, high availability features for clustering and data replication, and the latest, multi-tenant database, where you can share database resources between multiple independent databases, among others. The list of features is very large. We'll visit some of them throughout the course. Now let's talk about the architecture and terminology. Generally speaking, when someone refers to an Oracle database, he or she is referring to the database as a whole. This is the instance and the physical database. An Oracle database is comprised of the database files and the database instance. The database files are data files, where the data is stored. There are various types of data: user data, system data, undo data, and temporary data. We'll discuss this later in the course. Read-to-log files. Each transaction or operation done in the database is stored in the read-to-log. The read-to-log files plays an integral role in the recoverability of the database. Control files. These files store metadata about the database. The metadata keeps track of the number of data files, read-to-log information, transaction sequencing, backups, etc. Lastly, the SP file. This is where the instance initialization parameters are stored. There are other files that could be considered part of the database, but those are optional features enabled on a case-by-case basis. The database instance is comprised of background processes, server processes, and shared memory areas. The background processes are the ones that have complete oversight of the database operations. They keep the database instance running. Some processes are critical to the operation of the database, while others don't. We'll discuss this later on. The server processes are the ones that perform the activities on behalf of the users and applications. The shared memory areas are used by the background processes to store SQL or SQL metadata and user data. Finally, the listener. The listener is not part of the database per se, but plays an important role in the overall architecture. The listener enables the client processes to establish a connection through the network. This is part of the Oracle network stack. You can have one listener per host or server. You can have many listeners on the same host listening on different ports or networks. One listener can serve one database or multiple databases. We'll review all this in more detail in other modules. In this module, we describe what type of database an Oracle database is. We briefly went through the history of Oracle database versions, and we spent some time reviewing a high-level overview of the database architecture.